Tonight, we are witnessing a turning point, a rupture in the shifting sands of the Sahel. This is a story that will echo far beyond the borders of Bamako. It will vibrate across West Africa and into every frontier where the fight for stability has been paid for in years of blood, sweat, and agonizing uncertainty. This is Power and Pulse, where power is questioned and the pulse of Africa is never ignored. To our loyal subscribers, the Vanguard, thank you for being here. You are the reason the truth has a home. And to those joining us for the very first time, welcome to the front lines. You've stepped in at the exact moment a nation needed to stop being a victim. This is breaking news. Yesterday in northern Mali, a place where the dunes swallow shadows and silence has hidden decades of conflict, something unprecedented happened. Over 235 young fighters, members of the Jenin insurgents, laid down their arms. They weren't at a negotiating table. They were on their knees. Hands raised, weapons dropped into the very dust that once fueled their rebellion. This was not a gesture of goodwill. This was a total systemic surrender. As the Mali wakes to the dawn of following this seismic moment, the world is scrambling to make sense of it. The question is no longer whether the tide is turning. The question is how far, how fast, and how permanent. Welcome to a story of strength, strategy, and survival. Welcome to the moment Mali rose louder than fear. This is northern Mali, a region bruised by years of insurgency, a region long haunted by the presence of armed groups that threaten everything. From the safety of a mother walking to the market to the vital economic arteries that keep the nation breathing. But yesterday, the invincible image of the Jenin faction shattered. It wasn't a slow disintegration, it was a collapse. For weeks, Malian forces had been hunting them. These weren't just random fights. These were elements of the Jenin responsible for the heartless fuel tanker blockades. They were the ones burning convoys and aggravating a national fuel crisis that pushed Mali's patience to the absolute limit. Mali is a landlocked nation. Each tanker delayed or destroyed wasn't just a logistical problem. It was a direct assault on the belly of the Malian person. Transport costs surged. Cities felt the pinch. The countryside tightened its belt. The state took it as a direct assault on national dignity. And so the response came, not in symbols, but in fire and precision. Let's talk about how this actually happened, because the media won't tell you the how. They'll just give you the what. The operation that led to this mass surrender was defined by surgical clarity. Malian forces moved in fast, cutting escape routes and surrendering the group, shutting down every rat-run corridor that rebels once used to melt back into the desert. Within minutes, the balance shifted. Within hours, the rebels realized there was no martyrdom waiting for them, only a cold realization that they had been played. Eyewitnesses, both civilians and military personnel, recount a moment that felt like the hinge of history. As the perimeter tightened and the panic set in, the insurgent leaders' voices rose, but they weren't shouting battle cries. They were shouting accusations. The leader of the faction turned on one of his own, a man identified as A.N. Hussein. The allegation was explosive. He took the money. He led us here. He sold us out to the masters. He brought us to a place of no escape. Imagine the very people who claim to be fighting for a cause turning on each other the moment the heat gets too high. Panic spread like a virus. Their commander, once the pillar of their defense, finally told them the one thing they never expected to hear. Lay down your weapons. enough. If you stay armed, you will fall. It was a raw admission of defeat. Irreversible, and like a row of collapsing pillars, the fighters obeyed. Weapons hit the dirt. Hands rose. The battle ended not with a roar of gunfire, but with the heavy, deafening silence of surrender. Let's be real about what these groups are. They call themselves insurgents, but for the people of Mali, they were an economic blockade. They were extorting drivers. They were burning food. They were the reason a father couldn't afford to take his child to the clinic because fuel prices had tripled. Some analysts call it an insurgency. I call it an economic war disguised as a rebellion. They try to choke Mali. They try to make the people turn against the state by making life unbearable. But they underestimated the Malian spirit. Malians didn't break. They tightened their belts. They pooled their resources. And while the people endured, the government intensified the pressure on every single front. The last few weeks marked the turning point. One after another, the strategic Jenin leaders began to fall or flee. And then there came the move that changed the game. Just days before this mass surrender, the Malian state neutralized a crucial figure, the top leader of this very faction. He wasn't captured on a glorious battlefield. He was captured in the stillness of sleep, inside his car, unaware that his final hours of freedom had arrived. The psychological shockwave was profound. When the shepherd is taken, the wolves scatter. The remaining fighters lost their chain of command. Their cohesion fractured. Rumors of betrayal spread faster than a Saharan dust storm. By the time Malian forces advanced yesterday, the will to fight had evaporated. When we look at the footage of these 235 men, we see something the propaganda videos never show. We see exhaustion. These are young men. Many of them were likely recruited with lies of glory or forced into service by poverty and fear. Yesterday, that mask of the holy warrior was done. In its place were quivering voices declaring they were no longer part of the Jenin. These were the same individuals who just months ago released videos threatening to take Bamako. They attempted to project dominance across the entire Sahel. Yesterday, that image shattered into 1,000 pieces. The world saw the truth, not a dominant force, but a group of broken young men who could no longer sustain a war against their own nation. Security analysts are already calling this one of the most significant mass surrenders in the history of the Sahelian conflict. But for the Malian people, this is more than a tactical win. It's a psychological lift. It's a sign that the nation's efforts, military, political, and social, are finally converging. Mali is no longer a volatile space for others to play in. Mali is becoming a fortress of its own. Mali has shown its capacity to confront insurgent structures through strategy, not through external reliance. The state has stood firmly in its sovereign right to uphold the rule of the law. So, these 235 detainees will face Malian justice. Investigations will determine who was a leader, who was a follower, and who was a victim of circumstances. Some will face lengthy sentences, but all will be handled by Mali, not by a foreign court, not by a colonial proxy, by the Malian state. That is what autonomy looks like. The desert remembers everything. It remembers every footstep of every rebel who thought they could outrun justice. It remembers every whisper of rebellion, every cry for peace. But yesterday, the desert watched something it hadn't seen in years. It watched the arrogance of the insurgents fold like a house of cards. It watched fear being replaced by a new, hard-won reality. Mali has stepped into a different chapter. A chapter where threats crack under pressure. A chapter where young men once lost to the shadows are stepping back into the light of accountability. A chapter where a nation long underestimated shows its full weight to the world. The surrender of 235 fighters is not the end of the journey. We aren't naive. There are still shadows in the dunes, but this is the beginning of a new map. A map drawn by discipline, a map drawn by a military that respects its people and a people who support their military. The echoes of yesterday's surrender will travel far across the Sahel winds, but nowhere will they ring louder than in the hearts of the Malian people. So, in the face of terror, Mali rose. In the face of defiance, Mali stood firm. In the face of darkness, Mali lit its own path. This is not just breaking news. This is history being written in bold, permanent ink of a nation that refuses to bend. This is Mali's moment. This is Mali's victory. If you believe that Africa's security should be in Africa's hands, if you stand with the people of Mali in this historic hour, then I need you to do 3 things right now. Smash the like button to tell the algorithm that African sovereignty is the only way forward. Share this video. Let the world see the footage they want to hide. Let them see the surrender of the Jenin. If you haven't already subscribed to Power and Pulse, we are building the most informed community on the continent, and we need your voice. The desert is quiet tonight, but for the first time in a long time, it's the quiet of peace, not the quiet of fear. I'm your host Marie. This is Power and Pulse. Stay watchful, stay sovereign, and I'll see you in the next one.